In the early 1900s, British authority in India relied on a systematic campaign of psychological humiliation. Colonial officials openly mocked Bengali men, branding them as effeminate and biologically incapable of self-rule. For years, the mainstream Indian response to these insults was frustratingly polite. Politicians in the Indian National Congress spent their time writing letters and filing petitions, requesting small administrative concessions from the empire. In 1902, an intellectual named Aurobindo Ghosh and a student named Satish Chandra Bosu decided to answer the insult directly. They founded a group called the Anushilan Samiti. On paper, it was a fitness club. They set up local gymnasiums, known as akharas, where young men practiced wrestling, boxing, and traditional bamboo stick fighting, the lati. The stated goal was to build physical discipline and nerves of steel. This physical culture movement became incredibly popular. By focusing entirely on sports and exercise, the Samiti managed to gather thousands of angry, politically conscious young men in plain sight without triggering suspicion from British authorities. The fitness club served as a calculated cover. Behind the wrestling pits, the founders screened and recruited members for a secret underground network. Recruits trained for a specific, violent objective, a full-scale armed insurrection to overthrow the British Raj. The Samiti's architects treated the body as the first battlefield. Reclaiming physical strength was a prerequisite for revolution. They believed they could only dismantle the British Raj once they had shattered the myth of their own weakness. Joining the inner circle of the Anushilan Samiti required total commitment. New recruits took blood oaths on the Bhagavad Gita in front of the goddess Durga, swearing to sever all ties with their parents, sisters, and their homes. Members operated in isolated local cells called dolls. A strict firewall separated the civil branch, which handled propaganda, and the military branch, which executed violence. If captured, civil members couldn't betray the unknown military branch. The isolated cells coordinated entirely through secret codes and couriers. Soon, the group expanded its recruitment efforts well beyond educated university students. They began bringing in railway workers and factory hands and rural youth, massively widening their operational reach across Bengal. Through intense religious devotion and military discipline, they engineered a scattered collection of youth clubs into a highly organized, invisible state within a state. The tipping point came in 1905, when the British partitioned the province of Bengal. The policy enraged the local population and handed the Anushilan Samiti the perfect catalyst to transition from quiet preparation to open violence. The organization splintered on how best to strike. The Dhaka branch pursued immediate results, organizing armed robberies to fund their revolution and targeting British officials for assassination. Meanwhile, the Western branch in Calcutta, which became known as the Jugantar Group, focused on building a broader mass movement while still coordinating their own targeted attacks. But the leadership quickly realized a grim tactical reality. Bamboo staffs and daggers were useless against an industrialized, heavily armed empire. They needed high explosives. To get them, a school teacher named Hem Chandra Kanungo sold his property, gathered his funds, and traveled all the way to Paris. There, he tracked down a Russian revolutionary living in exile and learned the chemistry required to manufacture modern bombs. The ambition only grew from there. As World War I approached, the Samiti opened back channels with Imperial Germany, securing arms in an attempt to trigger a synchronized pan-Indian military mutiny. The Samiti was now a global militant apparatus, coordinating with foreign empires and securing weapons to strike directly at the British administration. The British eventually connected the gymnasiums to the bombings and assassinations. They responded with overwhelming force, creating the Calcutta Police Special Branch specifically to hunt down the revolutionaries. Following a bungled assassination attempt and the massive Alipore bomb case trial, the colonial government passed the Defense of India Act. This allowed them to execute mass arrests, throw suspects into internment camps, and systematically crush the physical network. With much of the male leadership in prison or executed, the movement had to adapt. By the 1920s, women, who had previously been excluded from the violence or relegated to providing safe houses, stepped up, taking on active combat and assassination roles to sustain the pressure on the Raj. The authorities dismantled the physical cells and arrested the founders, but the ideology the Samiti unleashed was now impossible to contain. The Anushilan Samiti formally dissolved in the 1930s. Its surviving members filtered outward, bringing their radical energy into mainstream politics. Many aligned with the rising communist factions, while others joined the left wing of the Indian National Congress. The Anushilan Samiti reshaped the Indian freedom struggle, proving that independence would never be granted through polite diplomacy. Instead, it required the total mobilization of the colonized body as a weapon of resistance.